Tony Smith is the former head of the UK Border Force, and he has joined us in the studio, along with Philip Ingram, of course, a former senior military intelligence officer. I've got all the people who know what they're talking about in the studio. Let's just go through these figures, Tony Smith, because I want to talk to you about illegal migration. You've dealt with that an awful lot. But we also have control of legal migration. In theory, we saw a massive boom coming, well, ever since Tony Blair. Basically massive boom through the 2000s. It was put on steroid under David Cameron in 2010 and then continued. We had that vote for Brexit in 2016. Big part of that was about cutting migration, legal and illegal, but illegal we knew the government had control of in terms of the EU. After that, Boris Johnson got into power. For some reason, it seemed to think it was a great idea to basically open the doors to everyone from outside the EU. We had these extraordinary stats for 2023. Net migration of 860,000 people more came to the country than left the country. It was actually over like 1.2 million, I think, who came to this country to live. Those figures have now been, well, halved. Extraordinary. 431,000 more people came to the country in 2024, the calendar year, than left the country. I know the government's going to hail this as a good thing and a great victory. All of this is down to changes made under Rishi Sunak's premiership. What's your reaction to those news? I mean, it's a halving of the figures. Is that good news?
Well, I think we need to put them into context, Julie, as you say, that actually these figures go from the calendar year January to December 24 to start with. The last three quarters of that are still provisional, so they may get updated.
And usually we do see figures updated.
You usually do see an upturn, but I think you're right, the government will claim credit for this. It's 430k, half of what it was the year before, but it's not down to this government because actually the changes introduced by the Conservatives just before they were de-elected, if you like.
And what were those crucial changes?
Well, essentially they stopped issuing so many care worker visas. There was a huge surge of those under Boris Johnson. Care worker dependents were stopped, student dependents were gone. So there were big visa changes that are now filtering through into these figures.
I mean, something like 200,000 fewer dependents of students and, as you say, low-paid care workers, people who, by definition, are an economic cost of the country.
What the Conservatives are saying is that this was down to them, but they will admit it was too little too late, actually. The Boris wave is still, reverberations are going to continue. I never thought I'd come on here and say 430k is a good figure. It's nice.
And this is the thing, because I think a lot of the politicians will be saying, and the Labour side will go, look at these figures. Tories will say we helped get it down. The Labour will say, well, look at the figures on us. Most people aren't going to drill down into it. This figure is still 100,000 higher than when we voted for Brexit in 2016.
So we're still important. We're still
off
important.
The scale.
Yeah, I mean, we're still importing a city the size of Bristol. Every year through migration alone, far exceeds, probably doubles the number of new houses that we're building. And as you say, about 100k higher than it was when it was considered to be exceptionally high during Brexit. It was about 350k, and that's one of the things that triggered the Brexit vote. So actually, 430k to me, having been in this business for a very, very long time, is still far, far, far too high.
This is kind of like somebody who was 25 stone and then saying, "Oh, great, I'm 18 stone." I said, "Well, that's great. That's great, but we're still obese."
Yeah,
that's kind of the territory we're in, isn't it? Which is just sort of
that's a good analogy, Julia. Yeah, that's right. So I mean, I think there is a lot more to be done. Now we don't know what Labour are going to do. They haven't done very much actually. They produced a white paper, which you probably reported on. Which
we love a white. We love people writing documents. That always helps.
I've read that. I've spoken to a lot of people about that. Promises maybe getting down another 50k, maybe 100k when they've implemented all those things. You're still talking about above Brexit levels, Julia.
Well, this is the curious thing. I mean, I know the Home Office and their own documents for officials when they're talking about, the government saying they're going to get the numbers down now under Labour, and they were saying realistically they won't get it down by more than 100,000 each year, and realistically it's going to be more than that, and because it always is more than that. But again, a lot of it's going to depend on the economy, isn't it? And a lot's going to depend also on, do you count, say, the youth mobility scheme if that comes into place, whatever they call it, and are they allowed to? Do you count those people? I mean, again, we have these battles about, do we include students or not? If someone is living here, they're here, they're using public transport or the roads or needing to go to the doctor or whatever. I mean, they're still here needing somewhere to live, aren't they?
Yeah, and a lot of the output have been students that have actually gone back, 500k output actually in terms of bringing the net figure down. A lot of those are students that were in the previous figures that completed their studies and have now left the country.
I mean, it's nice to know some of them are leaving.
Yeah.
These are people, of course, that was when we had a couple of years when people couldn't really come to study because of lockdown.
Yeah.
So then we had a big, massive number of them but they're now going.
Yeah, so there's a lot beneath the surface of these figures, Julia. But I mean, I think the main point is the government will claim credit for this, but actually I don't think it's their place to claim credit if credit is due, and I don't think they go far enough. Actually, most people will still be concerned. This is a very, very high number, and it's not a number that we can continue to absorb in the longer term.
And again, crucially, a lot of this, the number of the people who come in, the massive boom under Boris Johnson was from people outside the EU. You know, again, of course, everyone was accused of being racist for wanting to limit the number of people coming from the EU. And of course, I don't know how we were racist against white Europeans largely, but there we are. That's how the mind works of the people who criticise that. But we have seen a massive boom in people coming from India, from Pakistan, from Nigeria, other countries. Now, we have seen an issue, cultural differences, and this is a thing, and people go, oh, you've got a problem with someone being brown. That is not the case. The issue is whether people can speak the language, whether people can integrate, can assimilate, and are living within the communities that already exist here, or living parallel lives in parallel societies, and that's been a massive issue, hasn't it?
Yeah, integration is a huge part of immigration, actually, Julie. We've never been very good at it, actually. We don't get away with it because the numbers for, historically have been quite low. But when you start seeing large numbers of people moving into communities, if you haven't got a really good reintegration strategy, so they start to adapt to the norms in that community, they start to adapt to the new lifestyle, you then get sectarian problems in communities, which I think we're beginning to see.
We are beginning to see.
You get overseas battles brought onto your shores.
We've basically imported anti-Semitism to our shores.
So this is one of the problems of large-scale uncontrolled immigration.
Is that you have to have a certain, you have to limit to a certain number so that people there are fewer people arriving, so that they're almost forced to integrate. But also you want people who want to integrate. I don't understand. I don't really understand the expat thing when people go like, live in India and then just live a lifestyle that is completely like British. I don't really understand why people want to do that. It doesn't appeal to me. I would want, if I was going to live somewhere, it's because I want to make that place my home. I would speak the language. I would, which is why I like living in Britain, because I think Britain is the greatest place in the world to live. I really do. But this is the thing. There is an impact on this, and the problem is the politicians. You've dealt with a lot of them in your role as former head of the UK Border Force. They don't really see that as a problem because it doesn't impact them. They just get some cheap cleaners and cheaper builders. What's the issue?
So I worked for 40 years in the Home Office, ending up as head of the Border Force. So I did an awful lot of this over a great many different, colours of government all the time.
Been there, done that.
Well, I stand up for border control. Of course, I do in immigration enforcement. I support the officers that are out there doing that work.
It's nice to know somebody who works for the Home Office supports border control.
When you get into politics and you get down here into Downing Street and Whitehall, there's a lot of departments that are pro-immigration, Julia. So you're fighting against the Department of Health. They will say we need more health workers. Agricultural sector will want more people. A lot of sectors, even some economists will say it's good for the economy. I think that's been discredited now because at least we're now talking about GDP per capita rather than GDP. But I think what's happening now, we're seeing so many people coming in. There's a pressure on the welfare state. This is the issue. We've always had a welfare state in this country. People in this country expect to be able to see a doctor. If they're down on their luck, they expect to be able to get benefits. They expect to be able to get at least some kind of social health. I think people are not seeing that anymore because seeing the competition for those. Now, therefore, it's quite it's perfectly reasonable for those people to turn around and say, well, why are we bringing in so many people from overseas that are drawing on our welfare state?
If they're a benefit to us, why would they ever need to claim benefits?
And some of the studies that have been done by the Policy Exchange will show you that actually they're not over their lifetimes net contributors. And now, some migrants are, to be fair, some are, but many are not, especially low-skilled migrants who bring dependencies.
Who might do very useful jobs and everything, but we've got plenty of unemployed people here who could do those jobs.
Exactly. So we need to fix those problems at home and stop relying upon importing large numbers of low-skilled workers, which actually, I'm afraid, are in the end a net drain on our economy.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I also ask you about, obviously, having been the former head of UK Border Force, dealing with illegal migration, latest predictions from a data scientist who's been right all the time before is that we are looking at this year, if calm weather conditions continue, and we've seen a massive increase, about 40% in terms of number of arrivals on migrant boats in just this first part of the year already, after by the way, the boats were stopped and the migrant gangs were smashed. But that's not really showing up in the stats yet, is it? That we're looking at hitting that record number of around the 46,000 people arriving on the boats, largely men of fighting age, as Philip Ingram's been pointing out. But we could be hitting the 50,000 mark. I mean, how concerned are you about that? And in one sentence, what could be done about it?
Well, it's a huge concern, Julia. Of course it is, because these are undocumented migrants. We don't know who they are or where they're from.
They throw away their passports.
I wrote something last week about the screening process. I don't know if you saw the HMIC report on the screening processes at Manston. I've been to Manston. The officers there are under pressure to get people through within 24 hours, Julia.
Yeah.
You've got an undocumented migrant in front of you. You've got debriefers. You've got officers waiting to give them dry clothes, and you've got to get them out. If you don't, then the Home Office faces potential lawsuits for keeping people longer than they're allowed to under the regulations.
And this is, they arrive undocumented, and they arrive 24 hours, and then they're just basically sent off to a hostel or a private flat.
So I did all the screening for London 2012. I did border security for many, many years. You have to be able to hold people, at least so you've been able to do a thorough investigation into who they are, what they're saying, and what they're doing.
We know that some of these people will be potential terrorists.
Well,
that.
Look at the latest news, Julia, of some of the people that are now going on to commit mischief or being found to be, miscreants later on. Now, that's not good enough. We really could and should be detaining all of them when they arrive, at least for so long as we can thoroughly screen them. The other thing that's missing, as we've spoken about, is the removals deterrent.
Yeah.
Why did they scrap Rwanda? Why did they scrap that? There's nowhere to send many of these people to. They won't go back to France. They can't go back to their own country. Ergo, they know they're going to be allowed to. You must have a removals deterrent as well as really thorough screening. So, I'll keep detention and removals. It's what that's all about.
Really basic,
and I'm afraid we've lost the plot on